I'm happy to say that we've reached the compositing stage. So when you've got Nuke open, hit S for project settings, and we're going to make sure we've got the ACES color space loaded. So you change the color management from Nuke to OCIO and load in the config file. This is also part of Nuke as well, so if you go to Edit, I think it's Preferences and Color Management, then you can change it here. So ACES 1.03. Okay, let's load in our render. So I rendered out quite a few when I was testing this, so the render we want is V12, which I'll leave in the folder for you guys. We also want to load in V12 Cryptomat as well. Okay, so this is our raw render. It's looking pretty cool. Got some really nice detail in there. And I've shown you guys how to do the plant pots, the cloth, which is a little bit different here. I actually prefer the version that we've done together, minus the intersection with the chair. With the windows, you can more or less use the same technique we used for the wood on the chairs and just add a little bit of green and mix that on top. These trims around the building, you can use a really similar texture to this, like a marble. We covered the building here, and you can apply more or less the same shader on these archways as the column here, just with a little bit of tweaking. The flowers we set up for the table flower, and you can apply those same methods to all these flowers, and those flowers are available in Evermotion's Arc Models pack. The ivy leaves, I've left the shaders in the scene for you guys to pick up so you can have a mess around, and if that still confuses you, then I'd really recommend checking out Create an Atmospheric Environment, where I'll teach this a little bit closer. But again, the same techniques you can use from the table flower and apply them to the ivy leaves. The canopies, so the cloth here, I used a really similar method in Houdini using vellum to simulate them, but I think they could do with a little bit more work actually. I think next time I'd add more details in. I may even use Marvelous Designer for cloth until vellum starts to get a little bit more developed, as I'd like to add things like some extra seams and some pockets and things. The back building is more or less got the same texture as this building. I've just sort of mixed in some bricks underneath it, which I used from Megascans. And we've got a wine glass here as well, which is super simple. I left the shaders in there for you guys. And I think I'll be doing a tutorial on this, just on shading glass. And I'll be releasing that reasonably soon. And earlier on in the lighting, when we were setting the lighting up, I was saying that there was too much shadow sort of hitting this area. And the main reason for that was that we didn't add an opacity map to the leaves in the leaf blocker. So the leaves are rectangular and square, so that would be casting more of a shadow, but as soon as you apply the leaf shader, you get the leaf cut out and then you get more light coming through. So that would explain that. So now that we've just had a quick talk about sort of those elements in the scene, have a go, have a play around with them, render out this same shot, use the models from the Evermotion pack if you can, and just have a mess around, see what you can do. Okay, so let's start compositing. The first thing I'm going to do is just bring out the spec a little bit more. I think that's usually my go-to thing to do. So we'll pipe this in to emerge, and we'll take a shuffle node, and what we want to do is shuffle out the specular pass. So there, here. And you can see, if we take a look at this, you see how much more sort of information is in there that we can really pull out. So when I'm approaching this concept, I'm also considering the focal point. So what is in focus, and in this case the table is. So when I re-add this specular channel back in, I don't really want to add specular into the background in this background building, because that's going to draw my eye towards this section, and the eye should be drawn towards the table area. So let's plug that in, and I use the plus override, the plus operation rather than the screen. So I tend to use plus. Let's just hit D to disable that to see the kind of effect that we got, and we can see we're getting so much more detail and more of a spec hit on a lot of these objects, which I think is helping make them stand out a lot more. We're getting more detail here, which looks quite nice. And like I said, I don't want this specular being picked up in the background. So what we can do is just create a mask from the cryptomat, and cryptomats are insanely helpful. So first it's black, then we shuffle out the crypto mesh, so crypto to mesh, that gives us this. And the beauty with cryptomat is that we don't really need IDs and masks, it's already in it. So we can more or less select any single one of these objects, providing they're not instanced. So if they're instanced, then let's say for example these cloths in the foreground and background are instanced, then we only have essentially one cryptomat for both of those tables because they're instanced. So just bear that in mind when you're packing and instancing your objects in Houdini. Okay, so we shuffled that out. Let's drop down a crypto mat node, double click on it, and we'll view it. And what we want to do is select with the picker. So I'll just click in there, and I'm going to hold down Control, click here to select it, click on this trim to select it, so it all should go yellow. Click here, click here, click here. So we're just selecting the entire building there. So once I've done that, I'll say matte only. Now we have a mask. Let's invert that mask. So invert, and now we can plug this in to our merge, like so. So now we're only affecting wherever there's white. So wherever there's black, we're not affecting. So that's looking cool, but the only problem with this is that the specular channel, or the specular AOV, or the pass, is very blue. So what we can do is just drop down a color correction node. So just hit C on the keyboard, or you can hit tab and then type color correction. And what we want to do is just take out some of that blue. So let's click on the wheel on the gain under the master. I'm just going to drag this a little bit towards sort of like there, sort of like the orange, and I'm just going to pull it back. Hit D to view the change. And this way we're always sort of maintaining that nice warmth in the scene that the concept has. So let's see the result there, and we'll turn it off. So you can see that we're still getting our specular, but it's a little bit warmer. We could even try warming this up just a touch more. Just turning that on and off. So we're adding that specular back in, but it's warmer. And just push it even more. Yeah, I think that's looking cool. So that looks nice. Let's take a look at some of these marble objects, because they're looking very flat. So this isn't looking so bad here. This is looking quite nice, but we could do with bringing out the contrast and just dropping down the gamma a little bit just to bring out these nice details. And like I said earlier on in the course, we don't want anything to look flat. We want to give everything shape, and that doesn't mean that we have to add rim lights and add contrast to everything. It just means that we need to create shape in all of our objects, but we should always have a focal point, somewhere where the eye is looking, and we always want to be directing the eye. So there should ideally be sort of more light, maybe hitting the subject in certain cases, or there should be more volume over areas that we don't want to see. So they're just some things to consider. Okay, let's start with this trim here. We're going to do exactly the same thing that we did, and I think what I'll do is we will create another crypt mat node here and plug this in. We're going to select our trim there. Okay, matte. We will, I think we'll just drag this out so you can hold down control. So we've got our mask for there, and I'm going to keep adding in going downwards. So mask's always on the right in nuke. So we want this kind of thing happening. So we keep going down like that. So here we want to call this main building trim. And we're just going to increase the contrast a little bit. So we'll increase the contrast, drop the gamma, like that. Increase the contrast just a little bit more there. There you go. You can have a mess around with sort of the midtones. You can try sort of adding contrast there. In the shadows as well, contrast. Just to really bring out those details. And it was actually the saturation I was moving then, so not the gamma. So let's drop that gamma down. That really helps. Like that. Just drop the saturation down until it starts to go sort of like a creamy color. So now we've really brought out the texture there. But the problem is that we've really increased the black levels. So we can just lift up those black levels. So just increase the gamma. Try increasing the gain there. It's not playing ball. So maybe it's in the midtones. It is ever so slightly. And you can increase those shadowy areas. And I think something like that would be absolutely fine, just to help it stand out a little bit more. And just be careful that we're not making this too bright. So we could just turn, I'm just going to turn that down, and just gain it down until it sort of fits in with this structure here. So that's already looking a lot better. You can see now how flat this looks. So that looks cool. Drop down another color correct, plug him in, and we'll do exactly the same. Create a crypt mat node. From here, we will pipe this down to here. Let's plug him in. And I think what we'll do is add some contrast to this corner pillar. Let's give that a go. Right there. Just make sure that I've actually selected that. I don't think I did. So make sure you click on the picker, then do it. Yeah, there you go. We'll do exactly the same, more or less. A little bit of contrast there. Drop down the gamma. Yeah, that's looking cool. Drop down the saturation. So we get that kind of thing happening. Also getting some nice blur out there as well, which looks quite cool, but just be careful of that. Yeah, I like that. That's looking cool. Next thing is to do these archways as well. So this is our corner pillar. Drop down another color correct node. And just keep repeating these steps. I think I'll just copy and paste this a few times over. Copy him down there. Control clicking to bring up a dot. Plug him in. And this will be for our arches. I think we'll do all of these together. So we got this one, and we'll leave those little ornaments in there. We'll leave them alone. Matte only, and same steps. There you go. So that's pushing that a little bit more. We're seeing that texture a little bit more. So it's kind of cool. And like I said, just be careful by how much you're doing this. You can make the scene look like super like dodgy and fake. So just be mindful. Compare it with the other elements in your render and make sure they're not standing out too much, you know. Make sure those black levels aren't going too low. Make sure that your white levels aren't blowing out. So when you're adding contrast, you're increasing the black levels, increasing the white levels, and increasing the saturation. So there's a lot going on. Next one will be this trim up here. That only. And this is the building to trim. Make sure we've selected it, and again drop it down. Although I don't think there's too much detail we can bring out here, but so I'm just going to increase the shadows just a little bit there. See, it's just helping it. And drop the saturation down. Let's see what we did there. It's looking a little bit better. Just going to lift or gamma up those. Yeah, I think that's looking better. Yeah, nice. Could maybe even drop the contrast just a touch there. I think it's pushing it a little bit too much. Just be mindful of that. Next one up is these trims here. Add a color correction node again, and this will be our building BG trim. And if you were sort of doing this from, you were trying to make a super hyper realistic scene, then you'd want to be looking at sort of photography and reference when you're doing this. So yeah, so we'll increase the contrast, drop the gamma down to that. So you got that thing happening. Drop the saturation a little bit. Yep. See, making all those details pop out nicely. And it actually kind of fits in with the building a little bit more. And I find this looks super white. It looks like, I don't know, just looks a bit superimposed, and then you sort of add the contrast and it helps sort of ground it a little bit better. Cool. So we've done the arches, we've done the trims, done the corner pillar. Let's do this structure here. So the pillars. Grab another one. And I like to keep all of my nuke scenes like nice and organized. It can be a real pain to go into a scene that's an absolute mess. So just keep things nice and structured. Okay, so this is our pillar wall. There you go. So you can see these objects, this object is combined under the same node name, which was pillar walls. So we've only got one mask, or one cryptomat for this. So if you wanted more control and you wanted to control, you wanted one cryptomat mask for this, one cryptomat mask for this pillar wall BG or mid-ground pillar wall, then you need to create 3 different objects, or 3 different walls in Houdini. Okay, so here we go. I'm not going to do this too much. I just want to sort of drop the gamma just a little bit, increase the contrast, lift up those shadows just a touch. Make sure it's not going too, you don't want to go, the black's going too dark. So that's looking cool, but just got that happening. Needs to be a little bit careful about just going to drop the saturation just a touch. We're pushing this just a little bit too much, I think. Just should be nice and subtle. And what I'm going to do as well is add those little ornaments in, because it's standing out. So yeah, we composite them together. Go back, and now we've done it to both. Cool. There you go. So that's looking quite nice. May even just bring a little bit of saturation back into there, as I was quite liking that color. Let's take a look at it. So he's looking alright. We can maybe even do it for, I think what we'll do is we'll do it for those window frames as well. So we're really sort of refining a lot of the objects in the scene. You know, if I feel that an object is looking flat, then I'll try to pull out some shape from it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your eye is going to go straight to it. It just means that we don't want anything flat. So flat is bad. Okay, so this will be our main building window frames. We'll also include the ledges as well, I think. Let's dive in, select it. There you go. Nice. Matte only. And don't worry, I think this is the last one, which is good. So increase the contrast, drop the saturation, so we got that kind of thing happening. It's looking better already. Yeah, there you go. I think there's so much sort of bounce light from that secondary irradiance point cloud. Yeah, cool. I'm just going to do a quick save. Save this as comp08. And I think the next thing to do would be to add the sky in. So we'll drop down a merge here, somewhere around here. We're going to import a HDRI that I used. So this should be an E, digital assets, HDRIs, outdoor, ACCG, and the 236. That's the one I used. I'm just going to go back to the main render, and this is 221 by 1147. So when I click S on the keyboard, I need to change the full size format or the project settings to the size of our render. Otherwise we're going to get problems. We'll merge in A. So this is our render. Just going to put that there. Create a little bit more space, because if we need to add anything, we should be adding it in a line. Move this over a little bit. merge in our sky. Oh, come on, nuke. That's really annoying. Okay. There you go. So we're merging the sky there. So we've got that. We can transform it. So where is this right now? Okay, so we can transform it and scale it up. Transform, scale them up. Somewhere around there. I think that's looking cool. We can add an exposure node to this just to boost that up so it starts to go a little bit whiter, which is a little bit more realistic. And that's not for all the cases. You could make that blue. I just think it stands out a little bit too much. So white is fine. Let's add a light wrap to wrap some of that light coming in from here onto the CG. So mix in from, we can do it from here actually. So if I just grab that point there. So a light wrapping. Let's increase the intensity. Increase the diffusion to maybe like 130. Something around there. Yeah, that's cool. Merge them together. And now we've got some cool looking light wrap going on. And we also need to reformat this map to the size of our CG. So it looks like it's pushed it just a touch too much. So I'm just turning that on and off to see the effect. Turn the intensity down to like 25. Let's keep going. I think something around there is quite nice. It's nice to get a bit of bleeding. I think that helps sort of integrate this building at the back more as well, lifting those black levels up. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Yeah, that looks cool. Let's add in, I think, some sort of atmospheric perspective, so some depth cueing. So we can take the Z depth from our CG, our multi-layered EXR. So we'll shuffle out that from there. So we'll shuffle out the, let's take a look, the depth, which is this. And we can pipe that into a grade, and then with the grade node we can just mess around with these sliders, so you can mess around with the offset. And when I've hit like a certain point, I use Alt and left click, and now I can just scale that. Also sort of mess around with these sliders as well. Like there, something like that. And we can, just trying to think where we can put this. So yeah, let's put it out to the side, I think. Might move this later, but for now this is fine. Let's move that out to the side, drop this down here, and we merge him in. So we can merge in, actually mask should go from on the right hand side. So I'm just going to select these, drag it over all the way to the right. We'll just move this up here. I can move it somewhere like there. We'll do a merge, and we'll merge in the color of the sky, I think. So we'll take, drop down, and actually, yeah, I think we can merge in So we can merge in our sky again. And I'll drop down a merge expression, so it should just be a standard merge. So we merge the sky over the top, but we only want to merge based on our mask from our Z depth, which is there. Let's use a blur node. Yeah, just a standard blur node, and we can blur this out to like 300 or something. Just nice and diffuse there. And it looks like this is not graded. Yeah, so here we need to not only grade the RGB, we need to grade the depth. And here, this should take the depth in as well. So that gives us that. I think instead of merging in the sky, I think what we'll do is we'll just merge in a constant, I think, and plug that in. And this constant we can make like a slightly warmer color, I think. Again, keeping the atmosphere warm, being mindful of the concept. So here we can turn this down to, no, we can just really turn it down, so it's something more like that. Getting a little bit more atmospheric perspective there. Black levels are getting lifted just a touch, and that should separate that back building out a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's looking cool. I don't want to push this too much though. Should be kind of subtle, because this building is quite close, so we wouldn't see a huge amount of atmosphere on top. I'm used to working with two screens, so this view would be on the other side, so I wouldn't be sort of switching and zooming in so much. Okay, so that's looking cool. Let's add in, I think we can add in a flare, so we'll do an auto flare. And I get these plugins from Nukepedia, they're really awesome, so hats off to the guys that create them, they're so talented. So we'll drop down an auto flare. From here, we'll merge that in. And you know, you might get annoyed, you might think, oh, why is he using plugins, this is really annoying. But they just save you so much time. You know, I'm all about saving time. I'm going to take effect only, go to the presets, and we'll do something like a classic orange blue. And I'm just going to drop down the quality to like 0.3, I think. 0.4. It does make it a little bit quicker. Drop, yeah, I think we'll lift up this bright spot here. So this auto flare is actually based off the intensity values of what we're putting it into, so it's super cool. It's creating a really nice flare, actually. It's really nice. Holding down Alt whilst I'm scrolling this. It's looking nice. It's got something like that. That's looking really cool. Let's just try merging him in, and we can just drop this right down so we get something that looks, I don't know, something like that. And that also adds a little bit of warmth to the scene. We're getting some orange areas, which looks kind of cool. We're getting some blurrier areas from this building, which looks really great. So I think that's fine. I think that looks nice. Next, we can... I think we can add some lens distortion. Let's try that. So lens distortion. And I think I've got a plugin for this, so distortion, but I'm not sure what it's... Yeah, it's called an RE lens distortion. This is from Youtubeuploader. So yeah, so I'll set the focal length to sort of close to the focal length that we had. So that was, we were using a 28mm. So there you go. So we got the lens distortion from a real world RE camera. Or an RE lens. And what we need to do is we need to, instead of scaling up, we'll crop. So we'll crop this image now. And we'll just crop it by, let's take a look. We'll type this reformat as well. Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll leave that for now and we'll continue on. So yeah, so we've added our lens distortion. Just trying to think of the other effects we can add. I think we can add a little bit of glow as well. So everyone loves a little bit of bloom or a little bit of glow. And this is super easy using Nuke's glow node. So we'll increase the tolerance, something quite high. The tint is a little bit sort of too colorized, so just be careful of that. We'll also add the glow before the flare. So we'll add it here, and then we'll add sort of like a dot here to branch off the auto flare. Like that. Just going off and on. So we're getting a nice sort of highlighting there, which looks quite nice. Let's mess around with this. Mess around with the feathering or the blurring. Just want it to be kind of subtle. Getting a nice glow coming off of here. But I think overall it's a little bit too strong. So I want it to be kind of subtle. A little bit of glow off there. I think that looks kind of nice. Yeah, there you go. Then the auto flare goes on. You can even increase the quality of this to like 0.5. Should make those shapes a little bit more accurate. I think that's looking quite cool. We can add some chromatic aberration as well to this. And you can see it here. And the way chromatic aberration works is you tend to get more separation of the red, green and blue channels towards the edge of the frame. So, or towards the edge of the lens. So you don't want aberration everywhere. You want it just in, you know, just sort of at the border of the frame. So I think that's fine. It's like really cool. And you can get this plugin from Youtubeuploader as well. Really amazing, these guys. Just going to disable that. You can also turn off the blurring as well, you know, because you get that kind of thing happening. So we can turn that off just to minimize the amount the image is being blurred. We want things to be in focus. And that's also why I'm not adding Z depth or Z defocus, like depth of field, because I don't really want anything to be out of focus, to be honest. I mean, you could add a touch like here, so if you wanted to add Z depth, you could add a Z defocus node. Just gonna hit save. So Z defocus, and we'll plug that in. I'm glad I hit save because this is going to crash with use GPU if available on. For some reason it tends to crash. So I usually turn that off. So just going to go to the task manager and kill nuke. Let's relaunch it. Sorry for that. That was actually very lucky. Okay. Okay, so we're back. So let's drop down a Z defocus node, and before we plug it in, make sure you turn off this use GPU if available. I noticed the guys from Redshift were having this issue as well, so it's not just me. So let's take a look. We'll change the math to depth, and we'll change the result to focal plane setup. Make sure the depth channel is taking in our depth AOV, and we'll just shift this focal plane, just have a mess around with this. So the depth of field, we don't seem to be getting much of a result here. Turn off blur inside as well. Never use that. There you go. Sorry, we've got to move the focal point. And yeah, so I turn off blur inside, otherwise the entire image gets blurred. So we want the majority of this scene to be in focus, and the maximum will turn to 5. So how much of the shot is in focus? So that's depth of field. So you can say pretty much most of it really. And then the focal plane is just shifting that. So we want to say more or less all of this. So maybe we just have a few of the plants that are slightly blurred, and then the rest of the scene should be in focus. I see a lot of people adding like so much DOF and, you know, having this table you know, in focus and then the background completely blurred, and that just wouldn't happen with a 28mm lens. So it's just worth considering that when you're compositing. So think about how real world cameras work. Let's switch this back to result, and now you can see we've sort of blurred out the foreground just a touch. There you go. You can even turn that down to 1, just so there's not as much, just so it's subtle. Maybe go up to 2, that's fine. Yeah, it's not looking too bad. That looks cool. Let's check it out, see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty neat. Just looking around, see if there's any issues. You know, we could even turn the exposure down on the sky. You could have like a blue sky to sort of match the match the concept more. It's just, that's also another reason why I moved this background building closer inwards, is that I'm really not a big lover of infinite horizons, so I don't like to see sort of like the horizon going on forever. I like to block the horizon off. It's sort of like a quite bad for, you know, it's sort of like a telltale sign that an image is like CG. So I'm just going to check this. Zoom in. And I think it's the atmosphere we're adding on top. You could remove the sky from this selection, but I think that's fine if we leave the exposure turned on. I think in my final shot it was quite white, so there you go. And if there's anything I left out in this comp, then you can check out the other comp that I did for the sort of master scene, and you can have a dig around in there. But I think more or less that's pretty much it. I think I may have pumped up the wood a little bit more, maybe just to brighten it up and add some saturation just to draw the eye in a little bit better. But be careful of pumping things up too much, as you'll start to make it look even more fake. So just take that into consideration. Okay, so right at the end we have a gap on the side. We can add a crop for this. And here we will reformat. Lock the width and height. Just messing around with that a moment. Actually, we'll turn that off. And what I'm doing as well is that I'm actually lining up this point here, sort of lining it up so it's in line with this table. So the table is in the center of the shot. So you don't always have to put things like on the third. So that's not always the case. Just trying to get the framing right. And you could have a mess around with this. You could say, you know, crop this to like 235. This looks pretty cool. To get some really nice, interesting results. We could go with something like 16:9. And that looks pretty nice. So go from there to there, which helps frame it a little bit better. Try different ratios. 4:3, old school. Yeah, I think 16:9 is fine there. Just checking the edge of the frame. Yeah, that's looking cool. Okay, so once you've done that and you've decided what the crop factor is, you can drop down a right node, and we need to write this out so it's viewable for monitors. So we're currently in the ACES color space. We'll go to tutorials and images, and this will be, I think we can save this in like composited. Just create a folder called composited, just to keep things nice and organized. And we can say this is you know, an introduction, blah blah blah, introduction to working from concepts _ version, so version 1.jpg. Very important to include the extension, and then the color space we can set this to output sRGB, very important. Quality all the way up, 444, hit render. Re-import that image So I'm hitting R on the keyboard, and you'll notice this happens. Looks really weird. So we need to change the space to recognize this as sRGB, and then it's back. So we've got this here. You can also turn off the sRGB lookup and just view the raw. So you're viewing what you'd view in Windows Explorer. And that's pretty much it. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed the entire process. I've had a lot of fun making this scene. It's been a really colorful one. And yeah, it's been really amazing. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next course. Thanks for being part of the community.